So to circle back to some other supplements that are used pretty frequently and that we might want to reconsider, protein powders. You had kind of alluded to these earlier, but protein powders would definitely be, a category here or something that falls into that category where, there's a few different uses here. Some are just used as like post-workout shakes. You also have like the before bed shakes, and then some people are just using like protein powder shakes throughout the day. And there's a few issues here. First, just considering the ingredients, where getting like whatever the protein powder is, you talked about how processed they are. And because of that, they're going to have a lot less nutrition available for the most part, much less on the vitamins and minerals and other compounds that can be in these foods that can be beneficial. So that's kind of part one, is if you're getting a lot of your protein from those sources, like these powders, as opposed to from, dairy, seafood, meat, then you're missing out on a lot of other nutrients and other beneficial like macronutrients too, like not just vitamins and minerals, but you're missing out on good quality fats and potentially carbs too in the case of dairy that have a lot of good effects. So they are convenient, and so maybe we'll talk about a couple of the protein powders that might be best. But in general, they don't really offer a benefit over whole food protein other than that convenience. And the other thing too is that the time, people get really obsessed with the timing, but in reality, the timing doesn't matter too much as long as you're eating regularly throughout the day, getting enough protein overall, and not waiting too long after working out to eat, which I think most people wouldn't naturally anyway, because most people are pretty hungry when they're done working out. So considering that you don't need to force the protein in this particular window, it doesn't have to be within 30 minutes necessarily. It doesn't have to be as you're walking out of the gym. Considering that, it just makes more sense in most cases to have real food, and there becomes less of a need for the protein from the convenience standpoint. But from that convenience standpoint, I would say that there are some protein powders that are better than others. We talk a lot about collagen protein powder being beneficial, and it is as a convenient protein source, but it's not going to have the same like anabolic protein effects as some other protein powders due to the type of amino acids in there. They have a lot of those anti-inflammatory amino acids, but those aren't as growth focused. So as far as the protein powders that would be okay outside of collagen, you could look into, I guess I would probably lean towards whey, or maybe a combination of whey and casein. As you mentioned, I would probably stay away from the plant protein powders, which I remember when I was first looking into getting protein powders, when I was first starting to work out, I didn't have any real understanding of it. I was just reading like blogs on blogs or articles about which protein powder is best, and everyone said something different. And I remember I really got caught up on hemp protein. Like that was going to be the protein powder I got. And I went and talked with some personal trainer, and he was like, just get whey. Like just use whey protein. Like this doesn't matter. Just use whey protein. And I think it was probably the best thing that could have been said there. Because those plant protein powders tend not to be very bioavailable. They tend not to have favorable amino acid profiles for muscle growth, and they tend to come with potential anti-nutrients and other problems there. So if you were looking for a protein powder, I'd probably lean towards like a very good quality whey, not to, there's such a focus on the isolation of it, and so like a whey protein isolate is kind of like the most isolated or most concentrated, but there's also a whey protein concentrate, which is like a lower percentage of protein. And I would actually say probably like a really high quality, ideally grass-fed or something, whey protein concentrate is probably better. It's a little bit less processed than the isolate. And so you have most likely less denaturing of the proteins and some other components in there that are beneficial outside of the protein itself. So that would probably be my go-to if in certain cases somebody felt like it was necessary from the convenience side as like a post-workout type thing or an anabolic type protein drink. But I'd see so few instances where it's really necessary or would make sense.
Yeah. And I pretty much said before, like my thoughts on it. I think, and I agree, I think a good quality whey protein for the sake of like a post-workout insulin spike because of the amino acid profile would be something that's good. And then as far as like a casein protein or something like that, which is the other option here, I would say and people usually, or bodybuilders or fitness people tend to take casein at night because it's slowly digesting.
Mm-hmm.
My preference would be something like, I don't know, yogurt or cheese or something along those lines rather than a protein powder, right? Because you have the whole food there. You get with a cheese or yogurt, if it's like a full fat one, you have the fat there, which also can extend digestion. And it's not necessarily like, I think overall it's better. It's not just the isolated casein protein, right? There's a bunch of other vitamins, minerals, nutrients. There may be a little whey in there. There's the fat, and then whatever else came from the fermentation or whatever. So I think overall, I would think that a yogurt or a cheese would be better at night than just taking like an isolated casein protein. And that if and this is all in the context of if you're able to actually tolerate dairy effectively, right? Like you don't have an allergy or an intolerance, then yeah, you can do like some, I don't know, a yogurt with honey and some fruit, or some cheese and some fruit, and then like a glass of juice, or cheese and dried fruit. I think those are all great options. And again, this is usually taken before bed at night because it takes a while to digest. The fat in the cheese or the yogurt will slow down digestion a little bit, and not in a bad way, just it just slows it down because of the processing of the fat. But then also the protein, the casein itself, sort of coagulates in the stomach, and then it's slowly absorbed. So those would be my preferences over the casein protein. And as far as whey, as you said, it's just a quality whey protein.
Yeah, yeah. I'll link back to the episode where we talked a little bit more in detail about the different types of dairy, because I think it's helpful here, especially to consider when you're talking about the casein, the A1 versus A2 situation, where for people who might be a little more sensitive to that A1 protein, which is going to be a part of the casein protein, you end up with more of that, like of these casomorphins and this like opioid type effect, which is part of the reason why it can be slowing too, and why it can be slow digesting, and it's less ideal from that perspective too. So some people might have issues with most casein because of that if it is A1, but you could, as you said, if you're getting whole foods, you can do like a goat milk yogurt or cheese or sheep's milk cheese or something like that. That would, or just a high quality A2 dairy, cheese or yogurt or something that would not have the A1 casein. So it would be something to consider too.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. Exactly.
One other thing to consider, though, you mentioned like the insulin spiking effects of whey, which I think is really helpful to point out, which is like that's kind of this anabolic effect that is being looked for, where the protein stimulates the release of insulin to help get those amino acids, the breakdown, like building blocks of the protein, into the muscles. But that also means that it's really important to make sure you're getting carbohydrates if you're having these sorts of proteins, because otherwise you will be dropping your blood sugar and driving stress hormones, which isn't helpful from the muscle building standpoint or the hormonal health or any health standpoint. So especially if you're having something that you're intentionally trying to drive an increase in insulin with, in this kind of semi-reductionist view, you'd want to make sure you're getting carbs with it. But just even in general, anytime you're getting protein, like zooming out, less reductionist of just, I'm trying to drive amino acids into the muscle, just big picture, anytime you're having protein, it will stimulate insulin release, and it will cause a drop in blood sugar unless you have, it will stimulate the insulin regardless, but it'll cause a drop in blood sugar if you're not getting enough carbs with it. So that would be a key point there.
Yeah. And it depends on the amount of stimulation depends on the protein, right? So,
and the amount.
Yeah. But the proteins higher in the BCAAs will tend to have more of an insulinogenic response than say your collagen protein, which doesn't have a lot of BCAAs in it. So that's just something to keep in mind. And so the just sort of tangential, but just so people know, the two proteins that have like a very insulinogenic effect and like a pretty potent blood sugar dropping effect can be like egg white proteins, and then also the whey protein. So that's sort of why it's focused on so much in the bodybuilding spheres, egg whites and whey, because they have such a strong insulinogenic effect, and taking them with carbs, you basically can push the amino acids and carbohydrates or sugars into the muscle. And that's technically the whole idea. And the reason to do it after workout is because you just stimulated the muscle. So it's going to want to be replacing glycogen and repairing whatever damage and whatnot. So that's literally the whole theory behind it. And that's why whey is used. That's why eggs are like 12 egg whites are eaten for breakfast, whatever it is. So that's pretty much where we're at.
Which is another one, just while we're on the topic, just mentioning the egg whites real quick. There's a ton of benefits to the yolks there, and there are some potential drawbacks with just having the whites. So, and we've talked about why you don't need to be concerned about the cholesterol in the yolks and all of that in previous episodes. So I'll link to those, but just something to consider too is there's no need basically, or I can't see a situation where it makes sense to have just a ton of egg whites, or there's very, in general, I would say that's not ideal. So just something to consider.
No, yeah, it's not a recommendation.
Yeah. It can deplete biotin and
well, that's raw, but yeah, that's not a recommendation to go slam egg whites or eat a
Right.
whole bunch of raw egg whites. It's just the rationale behind these things. And I don't think it's 100% that, like, I think eggs are great, but I don't think you need to, like, only 2 egg yolks and then like 20 egg whites or 12 egg whites or however many ridiculous, whatever the number is. I don't think it's necessary. So
Right. Yeah.
If you enjoyed that clip, you'll definitely want to download the free Energy Balance Food Guide. The Energy Balance Food Guide will help you determine exactly what to eat to optimally support your metabolism and help you lose weight, improve your digestion, get amazing sleep, boost your energy, and so much more. The Food Guide makes it extremely easy to get started with a bioenergetic approach to optimizing your health. So head over to jfeldmanwellness.com/guide to download your free Energy Balance Food Guide.